And the Democratic team is set. Kamala Harris becomes Joe Biden's running mate as the Democrats prepare for this week's Democratic National Convention, just without all that convening. Today is Sunday, August 16th, 2020, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. We are deep into election season now. The Democratic National Convention starts tomorrow, and a week later, the Republicans get their turn, and nothing looks at all familiar. The hats, the buttons, the signs, the confetti and balloons. This year, those will be about as virtual as everything else. Actually, we have had virtual confetti around. Ta-da! But in a way, the strange settings will be a perfect backdrop given the most pressing issue of the campaign, and that's the pandemic that continues to march through American life. We're going to talk to several Democrats this morning, now that they have their vice presidential candidate in Kamala Harris, and notably not Governor Gretchen Whitmer. But up first, we're going to talk about the pandemic with one of the leaders of the fight. Francis Collins last appeared on Flashpoint to talk about leading the Human Genome Project. This morning, he comes back as the head of the National Institutes of Health, and he's up first today on Flashpoint. All right, my first guest this morning built a worldwide reputation as a gene hunter at the University of Michigan. He led the revolutionary Human Genome Project, and now he's the director of the National Institutes of Health. So you can imagine what his life is like right now. It is good to have with us Dr. Francis Collins back again on Flashpoint. Dr. Collins, thank you so much for your time today.
I'm glad to be with you. Hello, Detroit.
Yeah, good to have you back in our neck of the woods. I want to start with the announcement that we got this past week, because you said about a month ago you were getting pretty optimistic about the progress we'd been making toward a vaccine, and then we get an announcement this past week that Russia believes that they are standing right at the cusp of solving this problem. Obviously, Vladimir Putin inspires very little confidence and trust in what he says, but I also don't want to negate the medical and scientific footprint that Russia has had in the past. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Russia has developed a vaccine based upon an adenovirus vector, kind of similar to a couple of the vaccines that we're supporting right now in the U.S. But what Russia did was basically they did that first phase 1 trial, and we did a bunch of those back several months ago, and then they decided they were done, and they were going to go ahead and start distributing this. Most of us who've looked carefully at the way in which trials should be done over decades would say there's some risk there. The reason we do phase 2 and phase 3 trials is to be sure that a vaccine is really safe and it really works. And the amount of data that's been generated so far with the Russia vaccine would not give you that confidence. Yeah. I would not volunteer for this vaccine. I think by trying to say they're first, well, they're not really first in the sense of a vaccine that's gone through the usual hoops.
Well, some have suggested, though, Dr. Collins, that we've got our own Russia problem developing in that we are trying to push ahead of anything that reasonable scientists believe would be the proper way to go about this. When we look at the measles vaccine taking 4 years and all of a sudden we want to do one in one, are we guilty of maybe pushing the limit ourselves so far?
I'm glad you're asking, because I think I can be very reassuring about that. How is it that we're able, with cautious optimism, to say that we're likely to have one or maybe more than one vaccines that are safe and effective by the end of this year? How have we managed to telescope those timetables? Part of it is the new technologies of how you actually build a vaccine that make it possible when you've just seen the genome sequence of the virus to be getting into a phase 1 trial in just about 65 days. We didn't have the ability to do that before. But a lot of it is just basically looking at those long, slow gaps in between phases, which used to take months or even a year, and planning ahead so that those gaps, which don't really accomplish anything as far as safety and efficacy, get very much shortened. But I want to promise you and everybody listening, the phase 3 trials that we're running on the current vaccines, about 6 of them, are just as rigorous as anything we have ever done. And if FDA tells us sometime late in 2020 that vaccine is now proven safe and effective, they will mean it, and it'll be based upon the most rigorous data. No corners will be cut, I promise. I'm a scientist, I'm a physician, I'm not a politician. I don't care about the timetables. I just want this done right, and it will be.
We certainly hope so. A lot of people, I think, forget the novel portion of the novel coronavirus phrase or term. We're still learning. It's only been around with us now for about 8 months. We still are learning about it every day. What do we know about it now that we didn't know even a couple of months ago that is changing our approach?
Well, I think we are learning that it is has the ability to infect people without causing symptoms. At least 40% of people who get infected with this virus don't have any symptoms, and yet they're capable of spreading it to others around them. That's very different than almost any respiratory virus we've ever dealt with. And it makes all the more important this recommendation that we should all be wearing these cloth face coverings when we leave the home, because I might be that person who's infected and not know it. And I don't want to infect you if I'm out there in the grocery store or somewhere else out in public.
The politicization of the mask seems to me a bizarre place that we've arrived. And yet if you go back to Dr. Fauci's comments about masks very early on, there's been changing advice as we've moved through this, going back to the fact that it's novel and we keep learning. But that's kind of proved problematic, hasn't it, sometimes?
It has, but it frankly reflects on our knowledge of the science, which has accumulated over time. We did not realize back in February and March how readily this could be transmitted by people with no symptoms. So the idea of wearing masks didn't seem that important unless you were sick. Now we know differently. So the reason the recommendations have changed is because of that new knowledge. It is truly tragic, though, that this has become a political issue. Public health should never get into that space. And so I'm hoping if people are listening and wondering, wait a minute, well, why is this recommendation about masks coming from this doctor? Is that because he's part of the deep state? No, it's because I'm a public health guy. I want to save lives. We've lost 160,000 lives in the U.S. We could lose fewer if we all put on our masks and stuck to that as a really faithful commitment. And that goes for young people, too.
Well, one recommendation that has been debated quite a bit here in the state of Michigan, not even recommendation, but I guess a system that was put in place, seemed to many to be flawed from the beginning, and that was putting COVID patients into nursing homes. Some states have moved off of that, notably New York. Governor Whitmer has remained rather steadfast in believing that that's the right place to put some of these patients, even though she wants them separated inside a facility. But does that make any sense to you scientifically?
Well, certainly we know that nursing homes are a place where there has been terrible loss of life from this virus. And so we should be doing everything we can to prevent that from happening over and over again. One of my jobs is to try to work on better diagnostic tests so that nursing homes have access to quick testing so that every shift worker who shows up gets tested to make sure they're not bringing the virus into the place. I don't know Michigan's situation in terms of actually placing patients in nursing homes on purpose. If that were to be done, they would have to be absolutely strictly isolated from the uninfected people in the same facility, or this would be the worst possible thing to do.
It remains very, very complex, I know. Since we've seen so much loss there, we've also seen so much heartbreak there. But I want to ask you then about, as we try to move forward now, we still seem to be lacking what feels like to many to be a cohesive national strategy. This is very complicated as we watch now trying to reopen schools, and everybody moving at a different speed. And especially given the problems that we have with testing right now. If I have to wait a week or two for test results, it seems to me I might as well not have been tested at all.
I agree. The very long delay in test results simply undercuts the whole value of having the information, because if you're positive, you should be immediately isolated and not out there infecting other people. I will tell you, because I watch these turnaround times every day as part of the team here, that it's getting better and that you will see, I think, fewer and fewer examples of those very long delays. People should be able to get results back in 2 or at most 3 days and starting right about now. But there will be outliers, things where the sample got lost. Again, my goal would be, and this is something we're working on at NIH, is to have most testing done as point of care, where basically the testing apparatus is right there. You get the results within a half hour. You know whether you're positive or negative. That's the ultimate solution. That's just very challenging technology to develop and implement and then manufacture and distribute to all the places that need it. But we're working on it hard.
Lastly, this is a difficult question to ask of you to probably grade your own performance thus far. But when we look at the American response, and we've had so many more cases and so much death compared to the rest of the world in the way that they've handled it, how would, and the NIH is part of this, the CDC, our entire public health apparatus, how would you grade how we've handled this over the last 7 months?
Well, I think the real gradation is to look and see what's happened as far as hospitalizations and deaths. And in that regard, America has not done well. Our deaths as a proportion of our population does not look as if you would hope it would for such a far advanced country. Yeah, there have been missteps along the way. I would say, though, the way to turn this around is for all of us as Americans to say, this isn't just about the government doing the right thing. It's about all of us choosing to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Estimates would say if everybody today decided wear the masks, do the 6-foot distancing, don't gather inside, use hand washing and hand sanitizer, we could reduce the number of deaths by December by 70,000. Now, can't we all get together and do that?
70,000 lives seem worth saving, no doubt about it. Yeah. Dr. Collins, thank you so much. Great to have you again back on the program. And put us in your date book, because I would love to catch up with you on where you feel like everything we learned about genetics has led us to today. That's a whole other program for you and I.
Oh, yeah. It's all connected, though. So, yeah, that'd be fun to talk about.
Actually, right. Dr. Francis Collins, thank you so much. Head of the National Institutes of Health. We'll take a quick break. We'll continue. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
Some may wonder how Apartments.com has helped more renters find their place than any other site by digitally upgrading every one of our employees physically. Ooh. Now, everybody at Apartments.com can and does give 110%. Apartments.com, the most popular place to find a place.
We live with AT&T, and we are well past the honeymoon phase.
Occupado, Tom.
AT&T, what's this I hear about you advertising a 100% fiber network?
Only like a fraction of my customers can get that.
That's it?
You have such a glass half empty attitude.
The glass is more than half empty.
You need to relax, Tom.
Oh.
Tom, you need a little Tom time. You know, a little TT.
Stop living with AT&T. Xfinity delivers gig speeds to more homes than anyone.
One of Metro Detroit's largest gyms fighting to reopen.
We want to be part of the solution and help for a healthier Michigan.
Why the founder of Lifetime Fitness says decisions made to keep gyms closed are flawed.
The decisions are not based on facts or logic.
Join us Monday at 6 a.m. on Local 4 News Today. Join Local 4 and Mask Up, Michigan.
All right, let's point ahead now to the Democratic National Convention, which begins tomorrow in virtual fashion. Next week, I'll be joined by a roundtable of all Republicans as they get ready to have theirs, which begins a week from tomorrow. But let's start with the Democrats. And good to have back with me now Portia Roberson, CEO of Focus Hope, that you see we'll go clockwise from there. She's on the lower left side, not former Democratic Congressman. Current Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is there. To the right of her, we've got Bankley Thompson, contributing columnist for the Detroit News, and just below him, Jill Alper from Alper Strategies. Gang, thanks so much for the time. I want to start. Let's not get too far off of the vice presidential pick, which was watched, of course, so closely here in Michigan because of the relevance that we saw. Really, it kind of went up and then subsided and then built up again around Gretchen Whitmer. And Bankley, let me start with you, because I think I've talked to a number of Democrats of a number of different races who were very uncomfortable with what started to become less than a suggestion for Joe Biden. And I think, in fact, you were one of the people that turned it, I think, into a demand in your column that said if he didn't choose a woman of color, it would be fatal. Was that a fair burden to put on? And is it one now that the Republicans can make hay with?
No, I think it was the right move for Joe Biden, Devin, to really switch the pendulum and go with a black female. And this time around, it is Senator Kamala Harris, who is eminently qualified, a distinguished public servant, to now be the vice presidential nominee This was overdue, and we made the demand, and I think we succeeded in making that demand. There was no way, I saw Governor Whitmer as qualified to be on the ticket. She's spending her 2 years as governor. I mean, she has not done much that we can say on the national stage that merits her to be on that list. And honestly, Devin, I said in my column today in the paper that it was basically, in my view, white privilege. I mean, when you look at Susan Rice, when you look at Kamala Harris, these women are eminently qualified. They had, clear strong national resume, and there was no way how Governor Whitmer ended up on that list. But I'm very happy that, in fact, she's not the one. And Joe Biden had to do the right thing. Black women have been the base of the party.
Let me jump in because I'm pretty sure Congresswoman Dingell takes issue with that notion.
You know, what I think as women is that, and I look at this as a woman, and I look forward to the day that we're not looking at the color of somebody's skin, their religion, their background, but we're just looking at what their talent is for the job. But for women, there were a large number of qualified women that were looked at, were capable of taking this job. And quite frankly, Bankole, I do differ with you on, I believe Gretchen Whitmer deserved to be in that category, and the rest of the country saw a woman that was well qualified. I love Kamala. Every one of those women are my friends, but we did not need to turn this into the kind of personal attacks that this occurred. And every time, I'm going to say,
hang on, Bankole, hang on.
Every time a woman starts to do well, somebody comes out and attacks them. Men don't do that to each other. And we need to celebrate the fact there were so many talented women in that pool. And I love Kamala. She's going to be great. This is a strong ticket. But why do we have to attack each other?
Now, let me say something quickly, Devin, before you move. We need to correct the record. And I disagree with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Here's the deal. Susan Rice, Karen Bass, Kamala Harris went through the rigorous media scrutiny. Governor Gretchen Whitmer was never subjected to a media scrutiny.
She certainly was in Michigan.
not even in the national press. Not in the national press. Karen Bass, we knew what she went through. The same thing with Kamala Harris. They said she was ambitious.
Well, let me point out, Bankole, the conventional wisdom that, at least in historical terms, governors often tend to make better presidents than people that have come from other walks of life.
Not a governor who's serving a first time as governor and only 2 years on the job.
All right, I don't want to spend all of our time on this, but Portia, do you want to weigh in?
I mean, listen, I disagree with Bankole. I think Gretchen Whitmer got the right look. She was eminently qualified. She could have gone on the national stage. She would have gotten the media scrutiny that every woman who has ever run for any position ultimately ends up getting. And the reality of it is I agree with Congresswoman Dingell, that this is exactly what we do. I am overjoyed that it's Kamala. I was a supporter of Kamala when she was running for president. I would have been a supporter of any woman on that ticket, because not only is it a time for African-American women to be on that ticket, and certainly I celebrate that as one of them.
Hang on, Bankole. Hang on. It all starts to sound like mud on Zoom if everybody's talking at the same time.
50% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. We're not talking about that.
All right, Jill, I don't know if you want to weigh in.
We're absolutely talking about women being qualified across the board. And the reality of it is that the rejoicing we should be doing today is that there were a deep, deep bench of women for Vice President Biden to look at. He will be an excellent president. Kamala will be an excellent vice president. And Governor Whitmer will continue to be an excellent governor, should there not be other national opportunities that come her way, which there very well still might be.
All right, let's move on to what we're trying to see out of these two conventions, which is both of them trying to create like a sense of excitement and a buzz, given that we can't do any of it the way we usually do. But also, Jill, I think more and more there's going to be increasing scrutiny now on Joe Biden, who so far has not been answering a lot of questions from reporters. I thought the Axios interview that Donald Trump did was fairly disastrous for him, but I also found myself wondering, well, how would Joe Biden do handling those same kind of aggressive but fair questions? And we haven't seen him held up to that kind of scrutiny just yet. And I'm wondering if that's the elephant in Democrats' room right now. How worried are you about Joe Biden's ability to handle things that when they start to get tough now?
I'm not worried at all. Joe Biden's been answering questions for 40 years. I think he's probably as tested, most ready, most vetted as any presidential candidate in the history of our country, having served as vice president for 8 years. of his tenure in service. So, we had how many debates in our Democratic primary?
It's fair, Jill, but he does tend to
trip.
he does occasionally trip over his own tongue. He said some things recently about race that were, I think, cringeworthy for even his closest friends.
And so compare that to the President of the United States and in his daily tweets and press availabilities. Yeah. That's part of the process. People will make mistakes, and Joe Biden has made his share of them. But if you look at how America is viewing things today, and sure, there's a long way between now and the fall. We know that they have to perform, they have to do the work, the parties have to do the work, and the rest of it. But I personally am not worried about Joe Biden because he's got the right plan. He's ready to lead, and our country is ready for a change.
Debbie Dingell, I don't know how many Democratic National Conventions you've attended over the years. Never anything like this. And that building of excitement really is part of it for either party in trying to move forward. Are you concerned about the inability to do that, given its virtual nature this time around?
Actually, no. I think the virtual nature may actually get more people watching when it's critical. I've been to enough conventions, and I'm hoping that this round will get people to actually look at the presidential nominating the nominating process much more seriously. I think people are paying attention more than we've seen. COVID has turned this country upside down. People are scared about the direction that this country is going in. They don't see it getting better. They're waiting for something to happen this winter. And I think people are more engaged than you've seen them in a long time.
Portia, what are your thoughts going into the week?
Listen, I think first and foremost, Tom Perez and the Democratic Party started planning for a virtual conference well in advance so that they could make sure that people were excited about it, that they had a well put together convention. Unlike the current president, who waited until the last possible moment after having moved it from one location to another location to decide that finally he didn't want to put any more people at risk, even those people who were willing to come out with no mask on and not socially distanced. And they were finally willing to say that we need to do this virtually. So now they have the stellar Scott Baio performing or doing whatever he's going to do at their Republican conference. I think the Democrats are going to have a great convention. I think people are excited about this ticket. And I think, to quote a favorite line, I think Jill will back me up if this was his line. I've always attributed to him. It's time for Democrats to fall in line and stop worrying about falling in line with their candidates.
Bankalay, but in my 35 years of covering politics now, I don't believe I have ever seen a race where there seem to be so few people in the middle. Anybody who's undecided, I would love to talk to them because I just don't think there's a whole lot of people still trying to make up their mind, are they?
Well, I mean, there's a new racial awakening. But Joe Biden has a lot to do. He needs to be able to explain clearly what his policies are going to be. His 40-year career is marked by some unsavory things. The 1994 crime bill. Let's not peruse over that. To sit here on this Sunday morning and act as if it's all hunky-dory, I think is very disingenuous and it's hypocritical. This is the reason why a lot of black folk stayed out in 2016. Unless and until we are willing to confront the reality and say, look, we need to turn the tables upside down. We need to demand real transformation. Yes, I know black folk are going to support the Biden ticket because Kamala's sister Kamala is now on that ticket. But it's important for us to confront the truth, and we can't sit here and pretend as if it's been a rosy ride with Democrats. It's never been a rosy ride. We've always had to demand. And I'm glad that we finally demanded to have Kamala Harris here. And I think what should happen now, Joe Biden needs to be able to man up and say, look, I apologize for the 94 crime bill. I asked one Sanders I apologize for it.
I got about 30 seconds left for Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
I'm almost speechless. I appreciate what Bankalay is saying in terms of there is serious work to be done. There's serious conversations to be had when it comes to what's happening in our country today for African Americans. I think that was a big part of the conversation during the primary. It was African Americans who stepped up at a key moment in South Carolina to put him on the trajectory to the presidency and in his selection of Kamala Harris. But even before that, he has acknowledged that he has learned, he has made mistakes, and there is more to do, and that he has a commitment to doing that as President of the United States.
There's more to do here, too, but unfortunately, I got to get to a break. Gang, thanks so much. We'll take a quick break. Back in more in just a second.
Are you a parent that is struggling with work or the anxiety surrounding sending your child back to school? Dealing with mental health concerns? You are not alone. The Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network is here for you and your family. We have parent support partners in place to work alongside you and provide support. We're here for you 24/7. Here to talk, here to help. 800-241-4949.
WDIV prepares a children's programming report that is filed quarterly with the Federal Communications Commission. It can be viewed at stations.fcc.gov. Simply enter WDIV into the search bar. A copy may also be obtained from the FCC at this address.
This year, the largest free jazz festival in the world won't miss a beat. Gretchen Valade says the 2020 Detroit Jazz Fest can't be stopped. Enjoy virtual, live, in-studio performances on TV, on radio, and online. The 41st Annual Detroit Jazz Festival, presented by Rocket Mortgage, coming virtually September 4th through 7th.
Join Local 4 and Mask Up, Michigan.
Your voice, your vote. In our democracy, they matter and make our community and our country stronger. So make yours count. Get registered, learn the issues, know the candidates, and vote by or on November 3rd. Visit vote411.org for registration and election information. This message is furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
I think it was James Buchanan who said he loved the noise of democracy. He loved that segment. That was quite a gathering of the Democrats. We will do the same thing next week with the Republicans as they get set for their convention, but obviously this week we'll have the DNC covered for you stem to stern. Have a great week. See you next time on Flashpoint.